Lithuania's government has declared a state of emergency over security risks posed by smuggler balloons from Belarus.
US President Donald Trump said he would allow NVIDIA to sell H200 chips to approved customers in China for a surcharge. The European Commission launched a probe into Google over its use of online content to power its AI services.
European countries agreed on draft legislation that would introduce return hubs for migrants in a drive to speed up deportations. Lithuania's government has declared a state of emergency over security risks posed by smuggler balloons from Belarus that have violated its airspace in recent weeks. The balloons are used to smuggle cigarettes into Lithuania, but officials say they are deliberate acts of disruption orchestrated by Belarus. Tensions between Vilnius and Minsk have escalated after the balloons forced Lithuania to repeatedly close its main airport in the past weeks, leaving thousands of people stranded. Authorities also closed the Belarusian border for several weeks in late October due to the balloon threat. Announcing the state of emergency, the Lithuanian government cited national security interests and the threat to human life, property, and the environment from the balloons. The government has asked Parliament to allow the military to work together with police, border guard, and security officials during the state of emergency. It was not immediately clear how long the state of emergency would last.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with Pope Leo XIV in Italy ahead of meeting with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. At Castel Gandolfo, just outside Rome, Zelensky attended a half-hour audience with the Pontiff on Tuesday morning. The Vatican said the Pope reiterated the, quote, need to continue dialogue in order to achieve a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. During the meeting, the two also discussed prisoners of war and the return of abducted Ukrainian children to their families, the Holy See reported. Zelensky's trip to Rome follows visits to both London and Brussels, part of a broader push to rally more European support for his country. Speaking to European leaders, Zelensky reiterated his refusal to yield any territory to Russia. European officials expressed strong solidarity with Zelensky and backed the idea of pursuing further revisions to the US-authored peace plan.
First of all, it's clear.
EU Economic Commissioner Valdis Dombrovskis told Euronews Morning Show Europe Today that he disagreed with many elements in the US National Security Strategy, a US government document in which the bloc is presented as lacking confidence, pushing for censorship and drowning in illegal migration.
It's clear that European Union is actually providing strengths for members of the European Union, especially smaller countries, because in a current more conflictual, power-based world, it's certainly you can seek strengths in unity.
His comments came after the US updated its national security strategy last week, suggesting that Europe must revert course or could see the demise of its civilization as a result of poor economic policies and suffocating regulation. Dombrovskis said also that there are points on which the EU can agree with the US. According to the Commissioner, the bloc needs to show more assertiveness when it comes to Russia and support for Ukraine.
US President Donald Trump said he would allow NVIDIA to sell H200 chips to approved customers in China for a surcharge. The tiny chips are used to power a range of electronic devices, from smartphones to medical equipment. They're also essential to artificial intelligence processing. The decision opens a major market for NVIDIA despite concerns that China could use the advanced semiconductors for military purposes. A group of Democratic senators that objected the approval also pointed to the fact that DeepSeek, a major Chinese AI company, recently said the lack of access to American-designed chips was the biggest challenge when competing with US-based AI companies. The H200 is more powerful than the previous generation H20, but slightly less advanced than NVIDIA's Blackwell chip. Back in April, Trump banned the sale of H20s to China due to national security concerns. The ban came despite the fact that the chip had been designed to comply with Biden-era export curbs. A few months later, the president reversed the decision after NVIDIA agreed to pay 15% of its Chinese revenues to the U.S. government. The European Commission launched a probe into Google over its use of online content to power its AI services. The investigation will examine whether Google used web publishers' content to provide generative AI services on its search result pages without appropriate compensation and without giving them the option to refuse. It will also assess whether videos uploaded on YouTube were used to train Google's generative AI models. According to the tech giant, the complaint could hinder innovation in a market that is more competitive than ever. The decision comes days after the EU imposed a fine on Elon Musk's social network X for breaching its landmark Digital Services Act, further escalating transatlantic tensions. Since Trump returned to office in 2025, the EU and the US have been clashing over the bloc's enforcement of digital rules. Trump's administration accuses the EU of solely targeting US companies. However, the bloc says its legislation is non-discriminatory.
European countries agreed on draft legislation on Monday that would introduce return hubs for migrants in a drive to speed up deportations. Under the proposal, member states could return asylum seekers to unrelated third countries outside the EU through bilateral agreements. The hubs can be a place of transit, a step before the individual is returned to their own country of origin, or become a permanent location for those with no right to stay in the EU, provided they can ask for asylum in that country.
We now have the legal framework so that the member states can make reception centers and other that sort of solutions with third countries. That is extremely important in order for us to change the fundamental disabilities of the current asylum system, the ways we've been talking about for many years, that it's malfunctioning and that we help the wrong people and we don't help the people actually in need, and we can't control migration to Europe. That is an important step forward that we just have taken.
Countries also agreed on the so-called Migration Solidarity Pool for 2006. The EU's Asylum and Migration Management Regulation recommends that at least 30,000 people need to be relocated across the EU from countries under migratory pressure. But the bloc's Home Affairs ministers considered the needs to consist of just 21,000. 4 countries, Czechia, Croatia, Austria and Poland, were granted a total exemption from contributions to relocations and financial contributions to the Solidarity on Migration. Civil society organizations have criticized the introduction of return hubs as an inhumane practice that will increase abuses and overall human rights violations toward.
Greek firefighters traded their uniforms for festive red hats, bringing Christmas spirit to the Children's Hospital Hagia Sophia in Athens, Greece. One firefighter, dressed as Santa Claus, was lowered from a crane, gliding down the building to deliver gifts to young cancer patients who are spending the holidays in care. Parents and children watched from balconies and windows as the fire crews scaled the hospital's exterior, turning the facade into an unexpected stage of light, movement and cheer.
Κάθε χρόνο το πυροσβεστικό σώμα έρχεται σε εμάς, δίνει δώρα στα παιδιά με ένα πρωτότυπο τρόπο. Εμείς αντλούμε δύναμη από τα παιδιά, γιατί τα παιδιά είναι οι μαχητές της ζωής, οπότε παίρνουμε παράδειγμα τα παιδιά και είναι το ελάχιστο που μπορούμε να κάνουμε.
As Santa descended floor by floor, firefighters on the ground handed out presents, ringing bells and waving to the children watching from the balconies.
Αποτελεί για εμάς ιδιαίτερη συγκίνηση και χαρά που μπορούμε με αυτόν τον τρόπο να δώσουμε χαρά στα παιδιά.
The visit is part of an annual initiative by the Hellenic Fire Service, which organizes similar actions in children's hospitals across Athens during the holiday season.
European Council President Antonio Costa rejected any attempt at political interference in response to a controversial U.S. government document published last week criticizing Europe. The document, released by the Trump administration, called on Europe to change course and tighten immigration or face what they called civilizational erasure. It also noted that it will support, quote, like-minded patriotic parties across the continent to cultivate resistance.
Donc, on a des différences sur notre vision du monde. Mais ça va au-delà de ça. C'est certes que cette stratégie continue à parler de l'Europe en tant qu'allié. C'est bien. Mais si on est des alliés, on doit agir en tant qu'alliés. Et les alliés ne menacent pas de l'interférence dans la vie, dans le choix politique intérieur de ces alliés. On les respecte. On respecte la souveraineté des uns et des autres. Sûrement, plusieurs Européens ne partagent pas la même vision que les Américains sur des différents sujets. Et c'est naturel qu'ils ne partagent pas la même vision qu'on a. Ce qu'on ne peut pas accepter, c'est cette menace d'interférence dans la vie politique de l'Europe. Les États-Unis ne peuvent pas remplacer les citoyens européens pour choisir quels sont les bons partis et les mauvais partis. Les États-Unis ne peuvent pas remplacer l'Europe sur la vision qu'on a de la liberté d'expression.
The 33-page document also argued that a combination of ill-designed economic policies, excessive regulation, and illegal migration could lead to Europe's demise as a civilization. Washington says its goal is to help Europe change its current trajectory, a sentiment European lawmakers have slammed as unacceptable.